All right, here is our hyperbola video. I also put the YouTube video we watched in class that just explains how a hyperbola is formed. So if you want to watch that first before watching this one, that would be helpful. So I'm actually going to skip down here and take some notes in this blank space, and then we have 4 practice problems on the back that we'll talk about. So we have these two sets of the standard equations here. You'll notice that the difference between a hyperbola and an ellipse is a hyperbola has a minus sign here. Also, the denominators are a squared on the left and b squared on the right. And notice that in this equation, x is listed first, and on this equation, y is listed first. So when you have the situation where x is listed first, this is going to be, oh boy, that was a lie right there. This is going to be a horizontal situation where the piece of the hyperbola they're opening to the left and right. And when y is listed first, you're going to have a vertical orientation where they're opening up and down. And we still have to find a, b, and c today, and I'm going to make some notes down here about how to use those to construct a graph of a hyperbola. So in our equation over here, we still have an hk value, and that's going to give us our center. So imagine you have a center point right here. And then your a value is going to be the square root of whatever is here. So you're going to use that a value because this is a horizontal, this is going to be a horizontal orientation. So we're going to have vertices here, we're going to have foci here, and then we're going to have a center right here. So I've got my center. The way I find my vertices is I take that a value and I go over, I count a to the right, and I count a to the left, and that's going to give me my vertices. I find my focus point by counting c in the left and right direction. And the formula for c is c squared equals a squared plus b squared. So you would plug in your a and b, which you get from the denominators. A is the square root of a squared, b is the square root of b squared. Square root it, and that's going to give you your c. And when you start at your center and you count over in the c direction, a c length, that's going to give you your focus point, and you're going to do that both directions for your foci. Now, I feel like it should be a little further. Now, from the center, what we're going to be doing is graphing some asymptotes. These asymptotes are going to be linear equations. So if you remember, when we graph linear equations, we use slope, rise over run. Positive slope is in this orientation, and a negative slope linear equation is that way. And when we find the b value, which we'll talk about in the example problems, we'll be using the a and b to figure out the slope of the asymptotes. These are going to help us decide how far our hyperbola, our parabola shapes are stretched vertically or compressed. So depending on your orientation, vertical or horizontal, your slope will either be b over a or a over b. For a horizontal orientation, like we're trying to give a generic example here, the slope is going to be, so remember, slope is rise over run. So the rise is going to come from our b value, and the run, left and right, is going to come from our a. And that makes sense because we used a, we counted right and left, so that's a run situation. And this value that we get when we square root b squared, that's going to be our rise, our vertical shift. So imagine we do some kind, starting at the center, we do some kind of rise over run, and and that gives us this positive line. And then we do the negative version of that rise over run. So we would rise down and run right, or rise up and run left. These would be asymptotes, and then when we go to graph our hyperbola, we would start with the vertex, and we would just fill that shape approaching the asymptotes in that parabola shape. And then just imagine if this was a vertical orientation, everything would just be rotated 90 degrees. And now my A would be a run up and down, and my B would be, sorry, gosh, I'm trying to rush, so I keep messing up my words. My A would be a rise situation going up and down, and then my B would be a run. Okay, I think I said that right. I'm not sure. I apologize, but we'll get to it when we do the problems. All right, so looking at the back here. What determines the orientation is, so whichever variable is listed first lets you know your orientation. So if x squared is listed first, we know we have this situation right here. So I am going to start by just finding my A, B, and C. So A is the first denominator, so square rooting that gives me 3. B squared is the second denominator, square rooting that gives me 5. C squared is A squared plus B squared, so that's the 9 plus the 25, which is 34, and we're square rooting, so that gives me 5.8. All right, so I'm here. Now, my center, so we're going to find a bunch of information here and graph it. So the center is at HK. H is whatever's coupled with the X, like X minus H, and K is the Y minus K. Now, we don't have any minus values here, so I know my center is 0, 0. The next thing I'm going to do is find the vertex. So I want you to make a note here somewhere that the A value is going to give you your vertices, the location of them, and your C value is going to give you the location of your foci. And the B value is used to find your slope. So if A is 3, and I know that this is a horizontal orientation, so my center is here, my vertices and foci will be this way and this way. So I know I'm counting right and left. So A gives me my vertices, so I'm going to count right 3 and left 3. And sometimes it can be helpful to label these, just so we don't get them mixed up. C is for center, V is for vertex. And my ordered pair will be, I went right and left, so I'm changing the H value. I went right 3, left 3, so my H becomes positive, or not my H, but the X coordinate for my vertices is either positive 3, 0 or negative 3, 0. Let's find our foci now. The C value, 5.8, finds our focus, so go back to your center. You're going to count 5.8 to the right and then to the left. Okay, so similarly, I just changed the X coordinate from my center, 5.8 in both directions. So my ordered pair is plus or minus 5.8, 0. Remember, that's two separate answers. I'm just writing it as plus or minus. You could write 5.8, 0 and then negative 5.8, 0. So next we're going to find our slope. So remember that slope is rise over run. So we used our A value to go left and right. So that's a run situation. So I know that my denominator is going to be my A. And then your rise is up and down. So that's the last variable we haven't used, our B. So the slope is 5/3 in the plus and the minus direction. So the last thing I want to write is my equation, and you can see your formula sheet for this. We don't have an HK value, so it's just plus or minus 5/3 x. So this is a linear equation that I'm going to start at my center and graph it. So I'm going to do the positive 5/3 first. So that means rise up 5 and then run 3. I'm going to do that in the other direction, down 5 and left 3. So here is one asymptote. And now I'm going to do the negative 5/3 asymptote. So that means go down 5 from the center and left 3. Same thing, opposite direction. Up 5, left 3. And these determine the shape of my hyperbola pieces. Starting at the vertex, approach that asymptote, approach this one, approach that asymptote, and approach this one. I want you to pause your video and try this next problem. And this one is going to be a vertical orientation. All right, I've already worked this problem through A, B, and C, but I wanted to walk you through the rest of the problem since this is vertical and the previous was horizontal. So we talked about how A gives us our vertices and that this is a vertical orientation. So this time when I use A, I'm going up that much, so in this case 4, and then down. And this is my center. And then the C value gives me my foci. So the A value gets us our vertices, the C value gets us our foci. So I'm going to count up 5 and down 5. All right, so let's talk about the ordered pairs. We went up and down, which changed our y coordinate. And now let's talk about our slope. This time, so slope is rise over run. Our A value was a rise of 4. So rise goes on top. And now run is the B value. Ooh, I wrote 9 here, but I needed 3. So that is 3. And that makes my equation, since there's no center, HK, there's a 0, 0, plus or minus 4/3 x. So starting at my center, I'm going to go up 4, right 3, down 4, left 3. There's one asymptote. And then I'm going to do the negative 4/3 version. So that means down 4, right 3, and then up 4, left 3. And now I graph my parabola shapes, and we already said they were opening up and down. So I go to my vertex and approach the asymptotes, but don't cross them. All right, and then I'm going to make another video to finish out the remaining 2 problems.